Picture this: a pot of soil so dry, so hard, so completely lifeless that water rolls right off the top, like rain hitting a sidewalk. Not a single drop gets through. The roots underneath? Bone dry, starving, forgotten. Most gardeners look at soil like that and toss it in the trash. Done, finished, nothing left to give. That is a mistake, a costly one, because that soil is not dead. It is dormant. And with 3 ordinary kitchen ingredients, a single overnight soak, and a little patience, it can come roaring back to life by morning. No expensive fertilizers, no garden center trips, just a quiet transformation that happens while the house sleeps. The commercial fertilizer industry, a $2 billion machine, would rather this method stayed buried. Because once a gardener discovers it, the cycle of buying new bags every season simply stops. Here is exactly how it works. Part 1. The Great Deception of the Garden Setter. Before anything can be brought back to life, there is one question worth asking. What killed it in the first place? Walk into any big box garden center. The shelves are lined with bright bags of premium potting mix, every one of them promising lush, effortless gardens. What they do not mention, not on the bag, not on the label, not anywhere, is that most of that soil arrives biologically dead, completely sterilized, every living microorganism wiped out. The manufacturers do this to eliminate weed seeds and pathogens, which sounds perfectly reasonable, until you realize what else gets destroyed in the process. The bacteria, the fungi, the microscopic communities that make soil a living system instead of just ground-up rock. To cover for this barrenness, the industry pumps the mix full of synthetic chemical fertilizers, concentrated mineral salts designed to force fast green growth. And for a few weeks, everything looks gorgeous. But it is an illusion. Think of it like medicating a headache with painkillers every single day while ignoring the cause. The symptom disappears temporarily. The underlying damage gets worse. Beneath the surface, those mineral salts are building up. The osmotic pressure spikes so high it becomes lethal to every beneficial organism trying to survive in that pot. One season passes, maybe 2. The soil's natural immune system collapses entirely. Organic matter depletes. Without microbial life to keep things loose and aerated, the physical structure caves in. Compaction, suffocation, total oxygen loss. What was once a growing medium becomes a sealed tomb. And the industry's answer? Buy another bag. Throw the old one away. Come back next spring and do it all again. Planned obsolescence. Not for a phone, not for a washing machine, but for dirt. That is a $2 billion cycle. The soil stays dead because the chemicals prevent life from returning. The plants stay dependent because there is no life to feed them naturally. A perfect loop of dependency. But nature has never operated on a use and discard schedule. And neither does this method. Part 2. The invisible city beneath our feet. So what exactly was lost when that soil was sterilized? The answer is staggering, and it changes everything about how gardening actually works. Pick up a single handful of healthy forest soil, not potting mix, real undisturbed forest earth. In 1 gram of that soil, roughly the weight of a paperclip, there can be between 1 billion and 10 billion living bacterial cells. Not hundreds, not thousands. Billions. That is not dirt. That is a metropolis. Woven through it are miles of fungal threads called mycorrhizae, ancient organisms that existed on this planet long before trees ever developed proper root systems. These threads extend a plant's reach by 10 to 100 times, stretching far beyond where any root could go alone. They function like an underground postal network, delivering water and nutrients to the plant and receiving sugars in return. When one plant gets attacked by pests, chemical warning signals travel through these fungal highways, so neighboring plants can raise their defenses before the threat arrives. Meanwhile, beneficial bacteria are producing natural antibiotics to fight disease. They secrete biological glues, substances like glomalin that bind soil particles together into that soft, crumbly, chocolate cake texture every gardener recognizes. The kind that holds moisture without drowning roots. The kind that breathes. When container soil turns to concrete, it is simply because this entire community has been wiped out. An extinction event in a pot. The soil does not need more chemical salts. It does not need to be thrown in the trash. It needs to be repopulated. It needs a biological reboot. And here is where the kitchen comes in, because the seeds for that reboot are already there, sitting in plain sight. Part 3. The humble miracle of rice water. Every kitchen in the world throws away one of the most powerful biological starters that exists, without a second thought. Rice water. That cloudy, milky liquid left behind after rinsing a pot of rice before cooking. Down the drain it goes, meal after meal, year after year. Traditional cultures have known better for centuries. The Yao women of Huangluo, China, ferment rice water to wash their hair, and are famous for maintaining striking jet black hair that reaches 6 feet in length, well into their later years. Across rural Asia, this same liquid has been used for generations to nourish gardens and strengthen livestock. What makes it so valuable? That first rinse pulls a massive payload of starches, proteins, B vitamins, and trace minerals like phosphorus and potassium straight out of the grain. For microorganisms, it is an absolute feast. But, and this is where most people go wrong, raw rice water cannot simply be dumped onto dead soil. Not yet. If unfermented rice water hits that compacted dirt, the dormant microbes wake up hungry and start consuming the starch. But they need nitrogen to do that work, so they temporarily steal every bit of available nitrogen from the soil, a process called nitrogen immobilization, which can actually starve nearby plants worse than before. The secret is fermentation. Slow, quiet, patient fermentation. The technique borrows from both traditional Amish farming and Korean natural farming. Take the cloudy water from rinsing rice, about 1 to 2 cups, and pour it into a clean glass jar. Do not seal it tight. Cover the top loosely with a cloth or paper towel so air can still get in. Then set it in a warm, shaded corner of the kitchen. And wait. 3 days. That is all. Over those 72 hours, something remarkable happens. Wild lactobacillus bacteria, the same family that makes yogurt and sourdough, drift in from the air and colonize the water. They begin breaking down the heavy starches, multiplying rapidly. Fresh tap water contains almost zero microbial life. After 3 days of fermentation, that jar holds roughly 200 million colony-forming units of beneficial organisms per milliliter. 200 million per milliliter. From a cup of rice water and a little patience. The jar is ready when it separates slightly and gives off a mild, tangy scent, like sourdough starter or plain yogurt. If it smells foul or rotten, throw it out and start fresh. But if it smells pleasantly sour, what is sitting in that jar is a concentrated probiotic serum, teeming with nitrogen-fixing bacteria and phosphorus-solubilizing organisms that commercial products charge a premium to deliver in a bottle. That is the first ingredient, but an army without fuel does not march very far. Part 4. The metabolic trigger. A spoonful of sweetness. Now those microbes need energy, explosive, sustained energy, and this is where one of the most common and most destructive gardening myths needs to be addressed. There are videos all over the internet telling gardeners to dissolve plain white table sugar into their watering cans to feed struggling plants. This is genuinely harmful advice. Plants manufacture their own sugars through photosynthesis. They do not need sugar delivered to their roots. Pouring a concentrated sugar solution into soil creates severe osmotic stress, literally pulling water out of root cells and causing dehydration and tissue death. It also breeds pathogenic fungi that will rot a plant from the bottom up. White sugar is not the answer. Blackstrap molasses is. 1 single tablespoon of dark, unsulfured blackstrap molasses. And the difference matters. Blackstrap is the final extraction of the sugar refining process, which means it contains the highest concentration of minerals, sulfur, potash, iron, and a dense, complex form of carbon. It is not feeding the plant. It is rocket fuel for the fermented rice water microbes. When beneficial bacteria meet a rich carbon source like molasses in a warm, damp environment, they enter a phase of exponential growth. Their population doubles every 20 minutes. 1 cell becomes 2, 2 become 4. In just 6 hours, a single bacterium has produced over 200,000 descendants. That kind of explosive multiplication is exactly what is needed to recolonize an entire pot of dead soil in a single night. 2 ingredients down, you have a small 1 to go, sifted, and this last one comes from the fireplace arrangement. Part 5. The Ash of the Ancients. Thousands of years before the first commercial fertilizer ever rolled off a factory line, farmers on every inhabited continent already understood the power of wood ash. They scattered it across fields after harvest. They stirred it into compost. They knew, long before anyone had a word for soil chemistry, that fire left something valuable behind. Here is why it matters for this method. The fermented rice water, after 3 days of lactobacillus activity, has become quite acidic, dropping to a pH of roughly 4.5. If applied directly to soil at that acidity, it risks pushing conditions too far towards sour, which many beneficial organisms cannot tolerate. 1 tablespoon of sifted hardwood ash solves this completely. Wood ash is primarily calcium carbonate, the same compound found in agricultural lime, and it acts as a gentle, natural neutralizer. Mixed into the fermented solution, it brings the pH up to a balanced 6.5 to 7.0, the sweet spot where microbial life thrives. But the ash does far more than adjust pH. It delivers potassium, up to 10% by weight, along with trace minerals that commercial fertilizers almost never include: zinc, copper, manganese. When it enters compacted soil, the calcium works as a chemical wedge, pushing apart the toxic salt deposits left behind by years of synthetic fertilizer use and reopening the soil's ability to hold and exchange nutrients. 1 important caution: only pure hardwood ash should be used, from natural untreated logs. Never ash from pressure-treated lumber, painted wood, or charcoal briquettes. And wood ash should never be mixed directly with synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. That combination triggers a chemical reaction that releases ammonia gas. Unpleasant at best, harmful at worst. 3 ingredients, all from the kitchen or the fireplace. Total cost: practically nothing. Now it is time to put them together. Part 6. The Overnight Resurrection Protocol. Everything needed is now on the counter: fermented rice water, blackstrap molasses, and sifted wood ash. The biological seed, the metabolic fuel, the chemical stabilizer. 3 keys to 1 overnight transformation. Here is the exact protocol. Start with a 2-liter container. A standard watering can works perfectly. And fill it with warm, non-chlorinated water. The temperature should be comfortable to the touch, roughly 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This warmth matters. It reduces the surface tension of the water, which is what allows it to actually penetrate the crusty, water-repellent surface of compacted soil, instead of just rolling off. It also gently wakes up dormant microbes. Into that warm water, pour 100 milliliters, just under half a cup, of the 3-day fermented rice water serum. Add 1 level tablespoon of blackstrap molasses. Add 1 tablespoon of sifted wood ash. Stir gently until the molasses dissolves completely. Now take the pot of dead, compacted soil and set it inside a larger tub or basin. Pour the entire blend directly into the pot, slowly, steadily, until the soil is completely submerged. Not just dampened, not just sprinkled, fully soaked. The soil needs to take a deep, thorough bath in this mixture, then walk away. Leave it in a dark, undisturbed spot for 8 to 12 hours. Overnight is ideal. During those quiet hours while the house is still, something profound is happening inside that pot. The deep soak forces the microbial solution into every microscopic crack and crevice of the compacted dirt. The lactobacillus and other beneficial organisms begin anchoring themselves into terrain that has been barren for months, sometimes years. The molasses fuels their first wave of reproduction. The ash stabilizes the chemistry around them. By midnight, the colonization is well underway. By 3 in the morning, the population is surging. By dawn, something entirely different is sitting in that pot. But the real revelation happens after sunrise. Part 7. The Morning Breath of Life. The next morning, lift the pot out of the soaking basin and set it somewhere it can drain freely. A wire rack, a porch railing, any spot where gravity can pull the excess liquid out through the bottom. What happens next is the part no one expects. As the water drains downward and exits the pot, it creates a vacuum effect inside the soil. Fresh atmospheric oxygen gets pulled deep into the root zone, places that have been suffocating for months under compaction. This sudden massive influx of air hitting the molasses-fueled microbes triggers what scientists call an aerobic burst. The bacteria, suddenly flush with oxygen, go into overdrive. Populations double every 20 minutes. Millions become billions. And as they feed and multiply at this furious pace, they begin secreting extracellular polymeric substances, biological glues, that physically bind the fine, dusty particles of dead soil into stable, porous clusters. They are not just living in the soil, they are rebuilding its architecture from the inside. What was a solid brick of lifeless clay yesterday is becoming a spongy, breathable, living matrix. Want proof? Wait 48 hours after draining. Pick up a handful of that soil. Close your eyes. Breathe in. There will be no stale dust, no smell of rotting roots. Instead, there will be a deep, rich, unmistakable fragrance, the scent of a forest floor just after a summer rain. That scent has a name. Scientists call it geosmin. It is a volatile compound produced by a specific group of soil bacteria called actinobacteria, the master decomposers that break down tough, woody organic matter. The human nose is extraordinarily sensitive to geosmin. It can be detected at concentrations below 1 part per billion. When that earthy perfume rises from the pot, it is not just a pleasant smell. It is biological proof. A chemical signature confirming that the soil's immune system has been fully restored. The microbial community is thriving. The structure is rebuilding. The soil is breathing again. It is alive. Part 8. A lesson from the soil. There is something quietly powerful about watching dead soil come back to life overnight. Something that goes beyond gardening. That soil was never truly finished. It was starved of community, of connection, of the living network it needed to function. The moment those things were restored, even after months of neglect, it woke right back up. Maybe that is worth remembering on the harder days. The ones where everything feels compacted and dry and past its season. Renewal does not always require something new. Sometimes it just requires the right conditions and a little patience. So go check on those pots that were headed for the trash. Save tonight's rice water. Stir in a spoonful of sweetness and a pinch of ash. And watch what happens by morning. If this was helpful, consider subscribing to Rooted in Grace. Share it with someone who is about to throw out last season's potting soil. They might be glad you did. Until next time, keep your hands in the dirt and your heart rooted in grace.